But coming up, Biden is taking on more than one challenge, and we have the Obama veteran, Che Komanduri, the one and only, my special guest, next. It's not a drill. The president is facing volatile situations at home and abroad and warning that Putin may invade Ukraine soon.
They have not moved any of their troops out. They've moved more troops in. Every indication we have is they're prepared to go into Ukraine, attack Ukraine. My sense this will happen within the next several days.
The administration's diplomats now say Russia will also push a so-called false flag operation, which would create their argument of some pretext for a war. The U.S. says it will be false. There's also reports of some shelling in Ukraine hitting a school. Russia and Ukraine both blaming each other for that. That happened in the morning. Biden hit the road, went to Ohio to pivot from that very important issue to his jobs agenda, and also facing lower approval numbers as people are concerned about inflation, even with a partial economic rebound, plus the pandemic. There is some sliver of good news. COVID cases declining now in 49 of the 50 states. When you look at everything the president's balancing, we turn to Che Komanduri, a veteran of 3 presidential campaigns, including the Obama campaign. You may know him from Che Day on the Beat. Welcome back, sir.
It's good to be back, Ari. How are you?
I'm good. You look at the president here, and he's trying to show that they are all systems go to deal with Ukraine, while also being clear with the public that they don't see it as grounds for military intervention, regardless of what Putin does, and dealing with COVID declining and yet still at the second highest weekly death toll rate ever, and trying to remind people amidst all that, hey, he's tripled Trump's jobs numbers, and that's a good thing. What do you see in the balancing act?
Yeah, I think there's no doubt that if you're the Republican Party, you probably wish the midterms were a month ago. You know, sort of like the Cincinnati Bengals in the Super Bowl. You know, they had the lead in the third quarter, but there's a lot of time left on the clock. And the problem is that a lot of things look very good for Joe Biden and for Democrats going forward. You know, but as we approach the midterm, we are looking at a more favorable map for Democrats. We are looking, as you reported on, COVID numbers are declining. That is extremely important. Those pandemic restrictions have been really key to a lot of Republican popularity and Joe Biden's unpopularity over the last couple of months. I mean, if you look at all the factors that went in last November to Glenn Youngkin's victory in November of last year in Virginia, the reality is that a lot of those factors may not be apparent or as powerful in November of this year. The pandemic could be declining. Inflation could be declining. A lot of the anger about school closures could have ebbed away. We have an excellent economy with terrific job growth. All of those things are very, very positive, and I think they'd speak very well to Joe Biden and the Democratic future.
Yeah, and the other piece of this, we've hit this a couple different ways because as the world changes, our job in the news is sort of to note that. And so if a lot of people are living in a don't look up style world, right, where they don't acknowledge the asteroid exists, that's going to be relevant in politics. So, you know, I mentioned that because I want to show Senator Cotton here whether he's lying or is himself confused or just different problems for someone exercising power. But one thing that Donald Trump did do on criminal justice reform was, I call it mild, I said that at the time, it was a mild step on reforming some of these offenses for a slightly more lenient position. I say that just to be clear, it was something, it was not a big deal, didn't let a million felons out. But a lot of Republicans backed it and said that was their nod to criminal justice reform. Now, you got a Republican just lying, and take a look.
It's your party that voted in lockstep for the First Step Act that let thousands of violent felons back on the street who have now committed innumerable violent crimes.
The First Step Act, the Democrats did the First Step Act. The Republicans were in a majority. It was a bill sponsored by Senator Grassley, Durbin, Lee, and many others. And who signed it into law? Donald Trump signed it into law.
Democrat Senator Durbin there punching back. What do you see in that exchange, and how much is that a feature of this? Where are you talking about whether Trump had a third of the jobs of Biden, or are you dealing with a world where people, again, you can have empathy for them, but people are so misinformed they really don't know that that's the case?
Yeah, and I think that Tom Cotton's rhetoric speaks to a lot of Republican problems. I mean, if you think about Glenn Youngkin, one of the things that he did do, and we talked about it on the Beat, is people thought he was much more moderate than he really was. He was able to come across as a Mitt Romney clone, somebody who was non-threatening, not at all Trumpist. The problem with Tom Cotton's extreme rhetoric and some of the claims you're hearing about the GOP is it's very clear the Republicans are forgetting the lessons that they had thought, assuming they had learned last fall during that election. The idea was to sound more moderate, to sound more mainstream. The problem with Tom Cotton and what he's doing is he's just kind of doubling down on Fox News misinformation. And that is not really a path to electoral victory in a lot of blue states, where Republicans do need to win in those blue states to win big in November of this year.
Yeah. And look, I'm old enough to remember the Republican convention of 2020, where Donald Trump touted the First Step Act and had Ms. Alice Johnson speak because they were selling that. If Tom Cotton says that's, a danger to every suburban home in America, well, you can thank him, Trump, Grassley, and all of them. I mean, that's just what happened. So it's certainly interesting and important to give people the facts. Che, good to see you as always.
Good to see you, Ari.
Absolutely. Coming up, we have an important fact check. You may have heard people like Ron